Hey there, fellow plant nerds. Welcome to Planet Zoo. This is the first episode of my new series, Planet Botanic. And I'm so glad that you're here to kind of check out what I'm doing. I just got Planet Zoo, and I have played with it for a little bit, and I just freaking love the fact that there are so many plant options. I'm a plant nerd. By profession and by hobby. And so when I first heard that this game was coming out, I wasn't really thinking about, zoos and animals and stuff like that. But when the beta finally came out and they showed us just how many different foliage options and just how good all the foliage looks, I was convinced that I was finally going to get to do what I have been wanting to do in a simulation game for a while, which is to build a botanical garden. And I think this time I'm actually going to be able to do it. And so the first thing we're going to do today is something that I found on YouTube, actually. There is this gentleman that makes AquaTerrariums, which are basically just free standing waterfalls that then he puts moss and stuff like that. Sometimes he puts bonsai in there, and they're really freaking cool. So I thought my first foray into this game would be to build one that is ginormous, so that when you walk into it, you are overwhelmed at the size of it. So big rocks and big waterfalls and stuff like that. And so with the rocks being one of the things in this game that look particularly good, I figured this would be a good place to start. Alright, so here is the start. Now, in the video that I'm referencing, this guy puts together these volcanic pumice stones. He glues them together, and they end up being very vertical, and so I wanted to emulate that kind of idea. And that's why I have these really big jagged rocks here. And then I've got my waterfalls kind of pouring in. And then the other really important thing that I wanted to include was the fact that the AquaTerrariums are glass faced, so you can see into the bottom. You can see the whole bottom layer. So as you walk up to this thing, you should have an unobscured view in the glass, and I may have to change this one out for one of the curved glass pieces. But you'll have this unobstructed view of what's going on underneath. And so with all the different plants that are going to be in here, it's going to look really awesome, I think. I have to commend Planet Zoo's team for creating really beautiful rocks. All I had to do was kind of put them together in a bit of a logical way, but the textures are so good on them and the shaping and everything that it actually looks like real rock work, which is pretty damn impressive. Alright, I'm a little further along this time. You can see that I've started working with some of the foliage options. And this is where I start to geek out a little bit, because, whoa, I could do without this. Oh my gosh, this camera is terrible. So I've started adding some plants here, and what I wanted it to look like, in a lot of his different AquaTerrariums, he ends up doing some sort of themed design. He usually has some plants in there, a lot of moss, to make it look nice and lush and green. So I wanted to kind of capture that same kind of feel. And so I've got these bushes here, and they make great kind of hugging, and it fills the gaps and stuff like that. And I want this design to incorporate a few things. So at the very top is this kind of Himalayan birch, which I liked the kind of paperiness, the scraggliness, and then this dead tree. So I wanted to feel like when it's very high up, it's high in elevation, and as you move closer to the ground, you get then the deciduous forest with the bamboo, and then as you get closer to the water, you have all these cattails and all these water-loving plants. And so what it should look like when it's all said and done is this really vertical kind of design that is incorporating some really alpine stuff at the very top, and then more tropical as you get closer to the water. Oh yeah, I probably should have also mentioned that this was going to be under a glass sort of enclosure, and it's big. this being 4 meters itself, or 8, 12, it's a big structure, and so when you walk into it, you should feel overwhelmed by the grandeur of it, and I think that is coming off pretty well. I liked the initial kind of skeleton that the game provides with these glass pieces, but I wanted to beef it up and make it look a little bit more plausible by having this sort of ironwork here, and I think it works pretty well. When you have it on each one of the glass panels, it makes it look like it can withstand quite a bit. I think what I'll focus on now is working more on the design in here, because this, when it's all said and done, this should be very lush, very full, and I'm kind of excited to get going on it. Alright, a bit of a big jump. Once I started working on the rest of the design and the rock work, the whole thing kind of fell into place pretty nicely. I started including some of the flanking bamboo and this big tamarind tree that I really liked as a centerpiece. And then I also fixed the glass wall so that it's one continuous curved piece, convex. And then I've got this rock work that just kind of opens up the window a little bit, so you can kind of see in. You can see all the foliage that actually grows in the aquatic kind of environment. Woo. And also water lilies, because they also do grow in an aquatic environment, but you can see. And this is a really cool detail that I'm glad that Planet Zoo added, because in Planet Coaster they didn't have this necessarily, and this is really, really cool to see all the different strands and the new leaves coming up as the plant kind of expands. I really enjoy the detail that Frontier has put into just the foliage in this game. I mean, the animals are incredible too. We'll get there eventually, but I'm just geeking out with how good. Like, just look at that. It looks so freaking good. Once again, as you get further up, you've got more vertical things. So when the pockets get tight, that's usually when I'll start including some grasses, irises, or something like that that is very upright, doesn't require a lot of root system, and takes over and fills up quite nicely. So that's why all that is kind of growing up in there. I mean, it's a pretty stunning little centerpiece there as you're looking up. It's just this beautiful specimen tree that is very hard to grow in this climate, but you know, under this glass enclosure, it works pretty well. I worked to make the rock work look artificial, but still, it doesn't look blocky or anything like that. So I've got this kind of formed concrete look here, and then you can see the lines of the waterfalls. That's very common in what you would see in an artificial type pond. Alright, we're a little bit closer. I added this elevated pathway because I like the idea of having two different levels so that you can experience this landmark in a different kind of view. So when you're on the ground, you're almost intimidated by how large it is. You look up and see, like, oh wow. But you can also see underneath and get an idea. Maybe if we get fish in the future, that would be a good place to have some freshwater fish or something like that. I don't really know what they're gonna do in terms of aquatics, but I'm hoping that, you know, they do something kind of cool there. Oh, and this was a really cool thing too. So the soil level, you got this little bog area. The soil level is right next to the glass, so that you can actually see the roots growing from the grasses, because of the way that the roots will come up against the glass and then they'll splay out. But I think my favorite thing about this particular kind of observation point is, well, not only this really cool like log floor. I don't know who decided to include this, but that is really cool. I really love that actually. But when you are looking over the balcony here, first off, you can't see anybody underneath because you got the tamarind here. But the idea is that you are closer to the tamarind blossoms, and so you'll actually be able to smell that intoxicating aroma. And so you'll be like right next to it. If there are pollinators in the house, which sometimes greenhouses will do, they'll bring in a bunch of bees, you would actually be able to see the pollination happening on this tree right here. So I really like this sort of overview that you get. And then I decided to go with a lot more glass as I was playing with the day slider. I was noticing that I was getting big blocks of shadow, and that's not necessarily good in a greenhouse. You want to have as much light as possible. So I took the walls down a bit, and then the back wall is all glass as well. And here we are at the end of this build today. This is the last little bit that I wanted to add. Some pathing, and you just step into this thing and it's pretty immense. Just imagine you as a person just walking into this, and you can hear the sounds of perhaps there's some tropical birds or something like that. Just the echoing of the water. I think it's really cool. So I've got some benches hidden underneath this, and then I covered it in a big old slab so that if you were to come up here, you would jump up and you would get up close to the glass. You still wouldn't be able to get into, but you could get right up and close with the fishes and stuff like that. All the little aquatic life that's going to be in there if we end up getting some aquatic stuff. But I included a lot of grasses and stuff like that because in natural bottom ponds you end up having a lot of those aquatic plants. The other really cool thing is this kind of portal as you're walking through, which is going to be, if you look at it right now, yeah, it doesn't look super great right now, but we'll get it to a point where this is all nice and seamless. And so you walk in and you're greeted with all these different placards that are telling you what each individual plant is. So that is a giant bird nest fern. If we end up getting something that's smaller that looks like text, then I will definitely replace these out. But that is the smallest piece that I could find. This game is a little light on scenery, and so we have to make do with what we have. But I think it works pretty well. I think they look like placards for individual plants. There's some on this rock island right here. And so I've got this path that just kind of eases down a little bit. Comes around, it's a nice gravel path. So even if it was to get wet, you would still have traction as you're walking through here. Comes around and then it starts winding its way up. And so what I want eventually for this little part of my botanical garden to have is you end up having this upper path, and then you have this lower path. Well, I want it to kind of meet in the middle, and I want there to be an elevated path as you're walking around the rest of this kind of region. I think that'll turn out really nice. I gave the tamarind some friends, and so filled up this planter a little bit. And I wanted to include a bunch of different textures because when you look at these sorts of gardens, gardens underneath some sort of greenhouse glass, they are mostly tropicals or subtropicals, and they just have tons of different textures, tons of different colors. And so because we have so many options in the game, I went with things that kind of fit, that looked pretty good. And that kind of filled up the scene a little bit. I even have some moss that is just deciding to grow all the way down and take over that section. But I think I think that side of it looks really nice, and you can expect a little bit more of that as we continue into the other areas. I think this just looks spectacular. I would would love to visit something like this, just have these giant waterfalls. And if we end up having some animals that can work in this habitat, I would love to make this a seamless animal and plant habitat, because I think it would work pretty well. Well, I think that about does it for our first episode of Planet Botanic. If you liked what you saw today, you know what to do. Next time, I think we're going to start somewhere completely different. I think I'm going to start laying out some of the big structural parts of this botanical garden, because it's going to stretch over a large area. And the good news is, as far as I know, and I may have misheard this, but whatever, I should be able to blueprint this whole thing, and it should be able to take the terrain with it, too. So even though this is in the middle of nowhere, basically, you can kind of see, I'll be able to move this and adjust it to wherever I need it to fit, because these big old bunker walls, yeah, they're not doing it for me. So I'm gonna have to soften this down a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm gonna do that, but we will figure it out. I hope to see you all in the next episode. If you've got any ideas for me, comments, criticisms, anything, go ahead and leave them down below. And until next time, I'll see you later, guys. Bye.